Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to show how you can turn these wood rounds into a Lazy Susan tray. I also show how to make this pink buffalo plaid pattern. If you're new to my channel, then consider subscribing. It's completely free, and let's just get into the video. First, I sand down the wood. I recommend doing this because you'll want a smooth surface to stain and paint. I also recommend sanding in the direction of the wood. I bought this wood round from Hobby Lobby. The size is 12 inches and it's 1 inch thick. I really wanted the large ones from Home Depot. They are, I think, 17.5 inches, but they're almost always out of stock now because they've become so popular. But you can sometimes find the large ones at Hobby Lobby also. You can also find some wood rounds at Lowe's or Amazon, but they are thinner and a little different, and I prefer this kind. The stain I'm using is red mahogany, which is my favorite stain color, and I buy this from Home Depot. I'm using a sock to stain the wood. Someone gave me this idea on Instagram, and I thought it was super smart, and it works really well. I let the stain dry overnight before I begin painting it. I'm going to start off by painting my buffalo check design on the wood round, and I always like to use frog tape. If you are having troubles getting crisp lines with buffalo check, give this a try. I feel like it works better than the blue painter's tape. First, I'm going to tape off my wood. I want about 1/4 of the top for my design and the rest for the buffalo plaid pattern. I'm not sure if you can see it, but the wood rounds from Hobby Lobby and Home Depot have a line where the wood pieces were placed together, so it makes it easy to line it up straight. Before painting, I ended up adding a little bit of Mod Podge over the tape. The main reason why I did this was because the tape just didn't want to stick down to the wood. So to fix this, you can try that, or you can put polyacrylic over the wood stain, and that would help the tape stick down better. I'm going to use 2 different paint colors for my buffalo check. That is the pink acrylic from Walmart. It is Apple Barrel brand. For the white paint, I'm using chalk paint. I buy this from Walmart also. I like this one because it dries really quickly. I'm going to mix these 2 paint colors together to get 4 different shades of pink paint, starting from lighter colors to darker. For the first color, I'm going to use a lot of white with just a little pink. You could also do just straight white as well. For the second one, I'm going to mix white with a little more pink than the first one, and I just want to make sure it's a little darker shade of pink than the first one. For the third one, I use just a little bit of white with a lot more pink. The last one is just going to be the pink paint without any white mixed in. Now I'm going to take my lightest color to paint the base coat of the wood. I like to have a little less paint on my brush when I get closer to the tape to help prevent paint from running through, just because it still wasn't sticking that great. I turned it around and did a little bit of the sides as I was painting, and then I went in and did a second coat after the first coat dried. When my camera was turned off, the green tape started to pick up and it wouldn't go back down, so I ended up just taking it off and adding a new piece of tape. Now I'm ready to start the next part of my buffalo check pattern. I take a small piece of frog tape and line it up along the edge of the tape that's already placed down. This will be the spacer piece. I press this down, but not too firmly. Then I grab another piece of tape and make sure it is a little longer than the width of the wood board and press that right up against the spacer piece. With this one, I press it down firmly since I'll be painting over this one. I continue with this same pattern all the way down the board. I double check that the tape is pressed down well, then grab my second mixed paint to paint over the spaces. I'm using a makeup sponge that I bought from Amazon. I just recently purchased these after using foam brushes for so long, and these are awesome for stenciling. I'll leave a link in my description box for the ones that I bought. I recommend starting off with a lighter coat of paint, then keep adding to it. This also helps prevent paint from bleeding through the tape. Once I'm done, I let the paint dry almost all the way, then I peel off the tape. I don't like letting the paint fully dry because I've had troubles with the dried paint picking up with the tape. You can see here the nice crisp lines with that green frog tape. You'll want to keep that top piece of tape on this whole time. Next, I'll go the other way with the tape going down vertically. The trick with this is to use a ruler. I've made this before by just eyeballing it, and my squares were more diagonal than an actual square, so I learned my lesson. What I like to do is set the top of my ruler against the top piece of tape. Then I press my vertical piece down, and you can see how it's kind of crooked the first time I set it down. You want it to line up straight against the ruler. I'm using that first piece as my spacer piece, and once I have that lined up, I grab my next piece of tape and place it right up against the spacer piece. I double check with my ruler that it's lined up, then I follow the same pattern all the way across. After I have that tape down, I paint with my third paint mixture. This time, you'll want to make sure you keep the tape down. I let the paint dry, then I'm ready to add the last tape pattern going horizontally. You can use a spacer for this part exactly like the first time, or it's really easy to see the paint lines, so you can just line the tape up with that. Now I'm ready to paint with just the pink paint. I paint over all of that, and then I let it dry a little before taking all of the tape off. Here I'm taking off the tape. This is definitely a nerve-wracking part, but I also love to see how it turns out. I think the pink buffalo check pattern turned out super cute, so now I'm going to show you how to put the stencil together in Design Space. The first thing that I'm going to do is grab a shape to help me figure out my sizing for my stencil. I'll go over to my shapes, then I'm going to grab a circle. My wood round is 12 inches, so I'm going to go up to my width and type in 12 inches, and it'll automatically make the height 12 inches. About the bottom third is the buffalo check, and I want the writing to be on top of that. So I measured the top of my wood round, and it's a little over 4.5 inches. So what I'm going to do is actually grab another shape and grab a square. I'm going to make this 4.6 inches for the height. And then I'm going to unlock it and drag this over. I'm going to bring it back to 4.6 inches since it moved a little bit, and then I'm going to bring it down. I want to line the top of the rectangle up with the top of the circle, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just a way to help me visualize this. What I'm doing with this rectangle is I'm slicing out part of the circle, so that's why I'm covering up the circle, and this top half is the stained half. So what I'm going to do is select both of these. I always like to just drag over both of them, but you can hit shift on your keyboard too. And I'm going to come down to the bottom right and hit slice. Then I'm going to delete this. And right here, you can't really see it except for a darker line, but there's actually two pieces there. So I am just going to delete this piece. And now this one is separate. I'm going to hit undo and move it back. But now I'm just going to make this a pink color like our buffalo check, and I'm just going to make this brown. So this is kind of how our wood round is looking. And I'm going to go to uploads and grab my SVG. This is a patron SVG, so if you are a member of my Patreon group, then you have access to our SVGs. There's new ones every month. There's 190 SVGs now, and there's more put out each month. So you can also use these for personal and commercial use. So if you're interested in that, you can just check the link in my description box. Now what I'm going to do is just make this smaller. And then I'm going to bring this back up here. I'm just going to line it up to see what looks good. I'm also going to have some handles here, so I don't want to make it like really big so that it's in the way of the handles. I'm also going to highlight over both and center horizontally. So I might make it just a little bit bigger. I'm also going to be using white paint, and I kind of just want to see what it would look like there. And I think that looks good. Now I'm going to hide these because I just use them as a visual. And the last thing I need to do is weld or attach this together because as you can see, there's a few layers. So I am just going to, I'll just weld it and I will hit make it. This is a stencil, so what I like to do with stencils is bring it down a little so that I have extra room at the top and the side, because when you're painting you want to have a little extra room there. So I might even bring it down in the middle there. So then I'll hit continue again. I'm just going to choose stencil vinyl. I'm using Oramask 813 stencil vinyl. I love this for stencils. If I don't have this on hand, then I will sometimes use Oracal 651 vinyl. When weeding stencils, you want to weed out the actual design, which is the opposite of what you would normally weed. Next, I add my transfer paper. I get this from Expressions Vinyl and I love it so much. If you are looking for a good transfer paper, I definitely recommend it. I always have a link for it in my description box. I take off the backing of the stencil vinyl and line it up on the wood. This is opaque, so it's a little harder to see through it. That's probably the only thing I don't like about it, but I think Expressions Vinyl has clear transfer paper also. When I set the stencil vinyl down and lifted it up, it took up some of my pink paint. It only picked up what I painted last, so I'm assuming I just didn't let it dry all the way. I get super impatient with waiting for the paint to dry, but usually I don't have trouble with this stencil. Now I'm ready to paint my stencil. I'm using the same white chalk paint. I've used this for so long for stencils, but I really want to try a different type of paint. If you make a lot of stencils, let me know in the comments what paint is your favorite to use. So a little trick that I like to do when stenciling is to use a paintbrush and dab as much of the paint off as possible so there's barely any paint on there. Then start painting around the edges of the words on the stencil. I don't use brush strokes, I use up and down strokes. This kind of helps seal around the edges to help prevent paint seeping through. I know a lot of people use Mod Podge before stenciling. I have found personally that if I put too much Mod Podge on, some of the paint will pick up with it when I remove the stencil. But you can try a thin coat of matte Mod Podge also to try to help prevent bleeding. Once I'm done with that, I grab my makeup sponge and get a little more paint on that and paint over the stencil. I still try to not have too much paint. I would rather do thinner coats of paint and then do more coats, if that makes sense, when stenciling, just because this is another way to help prevent the paint from bleeding through. While I waited for that paint to dry, I filled in the pink paint that was picked up by the stencil. Then I'll do one last coat over the stencil. Once that's close to dry, I remove the stencil. I use my weeding tool to remove the inside pieces of the letters. I like to wait for the paint to be pretty dry when I do that, and the lines turned out pretty good. I didn't film it, but I finished painting along the edge of the wood round. I meant to only paint the edge where the buffalo plaid is, but I totally spaced it and painted around the entire edge. So I don't know if you can kind of see it in the video, but I definitely don't like that I did that, but oh well. Here I'm adding polyacrylic over the paint. I like to use this to seal it. The only problem was it must not have been dry all the way, the white paint for my stencil, because it started to smear some when I put the polyacrylic over it. So it's just me again being impatient and not waiting for the paint to fully dry. Next, I add the handles for my hardware. I found these at Home Depot. Also, I recommend adding the Lazy Susan part first because I ended up having to take the handles back off to add that. I just kind of eyeballed where I wanted the handle to go, and I made marks in the holes with my pencil. Then I took my ruler to line up where to put the other handle. I wanted it to come in about the same distance from the edge, and then I also wanted it lined up with the other handle. I used the drill bit to pre-drill the holes into the board where I placed my pencil marks, and not gonna lie, I needed my husband's help to figure out how to do this. Next, I switched it out with the screwdriver head and drill the screws into the handles. Here's the Lazy Susan turntable I'm using. I found this at Home Depot also, and it was under $5. It doesn't come with the screws, so I believe I bought 1/2-inch screws. I will link all the supplies from Home Depot in the description box. You can try to measure this so that the turntable is directly in the center, but I just kind of eyeballed it, and then I screwed in the screws in all 4 spots. You can also add felt pads on the bottom of the Lazy Susan. This would just prevent it from scratching your countertop. You can actually find those at the Dollar Tree also. I ended up spray painting the handles white. I just didn't love how the black handles looked, and after spray painting this, I love how the white looks. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful and enjoyed it, and if you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you are new to my channel. I would love to have you here, and don't forget to check out my Patreon account in the description below for SVGs and just a way to support me as well.